Congressman Mike Rogers is on the other end of our line, the Republican from the Brighton area, running for re-election on the Intelligence Committee. How are you, sir?
I am doing well, Michael. I understand you're horsing around at the studio today.
That's exactly right. And that sharp wit could get you elected one day. What do you think?
Maybe, maybe not. I had a better one. I probably shouldn't do it, but I'm gonna. You've drawn it out of me that there in the shadow of the Capitol, there seems to be more horses' asses than there are horses in front of your studio.
That's called stating the obvious.
All right, you made me say it.
But you know,
I did it.
The problem is, though, now we have two senators sitting with us in the studio here.
Nice to see you this morning, sir.
It's Jason Allen and Alan Cropsey, two Republicans. Good morning to you, gentlemen.
They would not be one of the guilty parties.
Okay,
sure.
good.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, Mike.
You sort of walked right into it. What do you think about, now the White House is saying they don't like the idea of a national moratorium on foreclosures. Mayor Bernero in Michigan is calling for one of them. So there's Democrats divided, I guess. National is a bit different than state. But what do you think about the idea of just putting the brakes on kicking people out of their house until we can figure out what's going on in this economy?
Banks that did it themselves, I think, was completely appropriate. They believed that they were having some process problems and may have been rushing through it. And if you're going to take someone's home, you better be absolutely right that that is the place that you happen to be at. I think it would be wrong for the government to come in and say they're all done in all cases. That doesn't make sense, and it's also going to make and put in jeopardy people, A, getting loans who are capable of paying them, and B, it'll impact the rates that people pay for their homes. So we need to let cooler heads prevail here. I do believe that banks ought to have the opportunity to work these things out. And this is my frustration with this administration. They say certain things and do other things. They've sent these regulators into banks and basically are asking for something called a lost loan reserve increase, which means more cash that they have to store up based on their loans, and they'll point at certain loans, and we found this to be true, that they'll say, well, this loan, we're not telling you have to call these 5 loans, but boy, if these 5 loans are on your books, you're going to have to up your amount of cash, which forces the bank to call these loans. So we're hoping that the administration can allow these banks, by getting out of their way, to work through these loans, and I think a national moratorium is probably not a great idea.
Senators, you agree at a statewide level?
I would agree. I think there are some issues that certainly have been fraught with problems. I saw one article this weekend where you were looking at banks where you had multiple signatures of the same individual, and they looked like they hadn't been signed by the same person. Oh. And so when you go through the approval process, like the congressman talks about, some of the larger banks were fraught with serious problems, and we've got to address those. But in general, coming up with a statewide policy would not work.
Senator Cropsey, were you disappointed the governor didn't sign that Sunday liquor sales bill? She vetoed it yesterday.
Well, I was one of the votes against the bill to start with, so, but I think it was for different reasons than what she had. I can't see the advantage of having increased alcohol sales on Sunday and other times. I just don't think that's good. It's kind of like I mentioned in our caucus. I said, oh, now we can get drunk before we go to church. Isn't that great? That was my opposition to it. It was totally different than what the governor's was.
Senator Allen, did you vote against?
I voted against it too.
You did too.
I just really felt this aspect of Sunday sales. We've got enough availability.
Yeah, but wait a minute now. Let's say you're on the East Bay in Traverse City, and you wake up in the morning and you say, you know what, I'd like to walk across the street there and get some vodka and have some Bloody Marys and put my toes in the sand all day.
At 7 in the morning?
Well, maybe it's 9.
Okay. I appreciate that. There's certain traditions and importance of that.
Okay. Family values Republicans, right? That's how you do it. Congressman Rogers, I'm just looking at Time magazine here. 8 in 10 small business leaders expect their costs to increase as a result of the new health care law. That's not what it was designed to do, was it?
Well, I think if you actually read the bill, which I did, I think it is designed to increase costs and force small businesses to push off their people who are on health care. McDonald's came out and said, hey, we're going to have to stop offering health care under this thing. Caterpillar said that they were going to do the same thing. We've had other businesses tell us they can't do it. I mean, this thing is just turning out to be a disaster. And think of this, Michael. to interpret the 2,700-page bill, they have already have made 5,000 pages of rules, and they say that when they're done, it'll be 35,000 pages of rules to interpret the 2,700-page health care bill with 154 new healthcare agencies that didn't exist before the bill. So this thing, it can do only one thing and increase costs.
Wow, that's hardly bathroom reading, is it?
No, and I mean, who's going to read 35,000 pages? I think half the Congress didn't read the 2,700 pages that has taken Medicare money away from Medicare, that has actually what we're seeing now is doctors are stopping to take new Medicare patients. I mean, this thing is really scary, and it's getting scarier by the day because of what it's actually doing. So all the rhetoric about how wonderful this is and it's going to reduce costs and, oh, by the way, you keep the health care that you want, all of that is wrong. And that's why I think people are so doggone angry, and it does not surprise me about the 8 to 10 businesses. And
Congressman Rogers, thank you very much for the time. We'll leave it there. We'll be back with Senator Cropsey, Senator Allen, 2 horses, and George Volman. Sounds like the start of a good joke, huh? We are with Senator Alan Cropsey, Senator Jason Allen, and George Volman, the Automotive Insider, here in our Gillespie Group storefront studio on the Avenue of Michigan. A couple of quick political questions. There was some talk yesterday about the funding for the Pure Michigan campaign, where it should come from. The governor had an idea. What's cooking?
I thought that the governor's plan had significant merit. One of my frustrations is 2 weeks ago we had leadership in from the MEDC talking about tourism and tourism funding and didn't bring it up. And so, you know, the study of whether there's the extra $200 million, I want to sit down and take a look at the numbers. But I think she has some merit.
There was some talk about not using the general fund, but taking it from 21st Century Jobs Fund.
And then part of it was also that there was some additional dollars available in the budget, that the state treasurer is running ahead on some surplus. Let's just see if that's all true. I think, you know, we've got to come up with a funding mechanism. We've lost our fall promotional program, but I recognize we're in some tough economic times.
Did either of you watch the debate, the gubernatorial debate?
I didn't see it, but I saw the stuff afterwards.
Yeah. Well, how do you think it's going? And supposedly the race is closing. It's a 12-point lead now instead of 20.
Well, I think Snyder has to stay right on message. I think people are upset with the last 8 years, and rightfully so. And I think they're looking for a change, and Mr. Snyder is offering that.
I will tell you that I was with Rick Snyder and some of his people at the Michigan State game afterward, and one of them said, geez, I wish the election were tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You just want to get that thing in the house, right?
Right. Yep.
There was a bear attack, apparently, in Petoskey. Did you hear about this?
I did not. I apologize. I missed that one.
A bear had mauled a 21-year-old Petoskey man last weekend, and apparently they're going to have to put the bear down because it's aggressive. 2 bear cubs climbed the ladder of this fella's tree stand on Saturday, and then, you know what came next?
Absolutely. Here comes Mama.
The 400-pound mother
That's right.
followed behind, and so he got swiped by the mother bear and had to have surgery at Northern Michigan Hospital there.
We know that from bear hunting experiences that I've had that when cubs come in, you better be very wary and leery of those types of situations coming. We know that mothers are very protective, especially in the wild, and so you just have to be careful.
Have you ever been down in one of those mines in the Upper Peninsula?
No, I have not.
I have.
What's that like?
It's eerie.
Yeah.
I was down in one of the mines, and you know, they're mainly closed now, or they're not utilized very much.
Mm-hmm.
At least the one I was in, and it's, you know, you go underground, and I just get the sense that here you have thousands and millions of tons of earth above you and rock, and you just say, I hope these pillars hold.
I can't imagine what those miners have gone through in Chile.
Oh my gosh, it's just
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things, because you know, you're talking about total darkness if the lights go out.
right.
Yeah.
When I was in the salt mines outside of Detroit, it was
Yeah.
just amazing to see sort of the remnants of all the different eras that did the mining. And then the surface mining that we've been through in the Upper Peninsula is absolutely amazing as far as the equipment and the scope and scale and how they get the equipment down through those elevators. It's amazing. So
Well, they've been bringing them out one by one.
One other plug for up north. I don't know if you saw 1110 and 1210 have their new fall sports schedule out, which
Oh,
is
yeah?
very impressive. And it goes through and charts every one of the small little schools up north, and it's a nice handout.
High school football is giant up there, isn't it?
It's amazing, And that brochure is it's very helpful because it goes from anything from Boyne City to Boyne Falls to some of the eastern upper Modesto
Great.
schools.
Well, congratulations to Rick Stone and everybody who puts that together up there. Let's talk cars for a minute. Senator Allen said he was at the proving grounds or the testing grounds for Ford Motor Company a couple weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, they hosted a legislative tour. I know Al was busy. It's amazing what the fleet is going to be looking like for next year.
Yeah.
The new Explorer, I love.
Well, George Volman, the automotive insider from Volman Ford on I-96, you were yesterday at the track, too, in Dearborn.
Driving automobiles on the High Bank Oval.
What was that like?
Cool.
It was it was a lot of fun, even though they limited the iconic AC Roadster, which is what we were testing, to 90. The guy did, I think, 125.
Yeah? Really?
And I asked him the capability of the car, because obviously we weren't going to see the top end. He says over 200 miles per hour. This is a car that has basically been engineered in Michigan, will be built in Michigan, and it is sourced from handmade parts, okay, from the original aluminum or titanium billets, and it stays with the tradition of the AC Roadster, which goes back to basically the company goes back to the turn of the first century of automotive engineering and goes all the way through. So of course I had a couple questions. One was okay, why the Ford Proving Grounds? Well, it was more centrally located than going out to let's say a race course in South Haven or someplace else. And the second thing was what's the connection with Ford Motor Company? Well, Ford Motor Company was involved with AC back in, I think, the late 70s and early 80s when they were doing a lot of racing. But more importantly, some of the engineering people that have engineered the iconic AC Roadster also did GT 500s and some of the Mustang race cars for Ford Motor Company. So there's that connection. So the quality of what they're doing is phenomenal. The car was unbelievable. I think we pulled on the skid pad over 1.5 Gs, or at least that's the way it felt. And it's kind of like being at the rocket ship rides at Cedar Point. That's how that feels. Wow. But just to give you how the driver worked with us, he said he'll only go to 70% of the car's capability and his capability on the Gymkhana class. So after the first run, he says, I just want you to get used to this. So we went through it, and I said, so, okay, on the scale of being at 100% or 70%, where were you? He says, about 30. So he says, let me dial it up to 50. That was unbelievable, and we still had 50% to go. It's an unbelievable car.
Jeez. George Volman, the Automotive Insider, VolmanFord.com or theautomotiveinsider.com. Stay tuned for more in 4 minutes. It's Michael Patrick Shields.